Well, some people think that cats are easier to manage than dogs. Really? You know, or they ask me, do you like dogs or cats better? Well, I love them both, but they're a bit like apples and oranges, aren't they? You know, the truth is that, with cats, you should forget the spray bottle, unless, of course, they catch fire. The truth is that cats can learn. We have to set them up for success. That's our job. And by the way, oh, Cindy, you're here. Wonderful. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming, as always. So, has anybody here ever had a cat who misbehaved? Boy, I do. I have a couple of them who do that. That was Tony who just disappeared. Tony, do you want to come back up here? Come here, baby. Come in. Jump right up here. Miss America says, well, I'll have some cat food. So, if you have any history of your cat, doing things that are inappropriate or just plain wrong, put them in there. Let's talk about it a little bit, because like everything else, whether it's a brain disorder that's manifest as a behavior problem, or if it's a lameness or stomach or intestinal disease, you name it, we need to figure out why the problem is going on if we're going to really make a difference and help them out. That's what we're going to talk about today, because I have a story for you that I would like to share, because I think it'll help illustrate a point. But I'm going to talk about this little rascal here, and one of the things I'm working with him right now on, because they're work in progress, like the rest of us, aren't we? By the way, if everybody can hear me loud and clear, please hit the wow button so that I know that we're not having technical difficulties. And if you find this helpful, send me some hearts, just so that I know I'm doing something valuable. And if questions come up, put them in and just derail me. I'm happy to talk about them. And by the way, this is Tony, one of our cats. I left Gaston out tonight because I want to show you, what I'm doing with Tony to work with him. And of course, this is Miss America, who's here for comic relief, because this time we're not talking about dogs. We're talking about cats. Okay. Oh, hearts. Thank you. Okay. So already this is helpful. Thank you very much. Okay. So here's a story about a case I saw not too many years ago, a cat named Cookie. And I'm going to read you this and explain it to you. And I'm writing stories. Well, I'm not writing. I'm taking cases that I've handled and putting them in story form, because I'm building chapters for a book. And so you guys get the first look at this thing. And I'll put this this kind of thing we'll find on my, thank you, Carolyn. I'm building a new website that'll have this stuff in it too. But that's a little ways into the future. Okay, so Cookie was a kitty who was adopted in Albuquerque and added to Sarah's household of 3 other cats. Now that's already a pretty good-sized group. In fact, not necessarily a good-sized group, because they can get easily crowded. Cats are social, certainly, but in ways that are very different than humans and dogs, and they can develop significant behavior problems because they've got too darn many of them, and we're going to see more about that in this case. So about 9 months later, Sarah and her partner, they moved to a 4-plex apartment. And that's when Cookie's yowling and night waking and pacing started. They didn't notice a problem before that, but I can assure you that it was gradually building. So she would always wake the first time during the night at about 1 o'clock, and she would start yowling. And often her people could succeed in getting her back to sleep, but it would repeat as many as 5 times each night. These were sleep-deprived folks. Tony T, there you go. Come on back up here, buddy. So, also living in the same 4-plex, and this is why they moved there, was Sarah's mom and her brother and their 6 cats and 2 dogs in an apartment. Several of Mom's cats were urine sprayers, and I'll tell you why, and that's because they were highly stressed. And in another apartment in the 4-plex had 2 cats, and at least one of them was spraying the door to Sarah's apartment. Ooh, here's a problem, right? Now, there are multiple other cats in the immediate neighborhood. There was a small walled front yard, about the size of an exam room in a veterinary clinic. We veterinarians think in terms of how big is an exam room? 10 by 12, about the size of their yard. And there was a little shared backyard as well, where there were no changes anticipated in anybody's living environment, recognizing right away that these cats were just too much togetherness, way too much, and already a great deal of stress. But the big thing that these folks came in for was that they couldn't sleep because here was Cookie waking up and keeping everybody awake and acting agitated. Well, of course, everybody needs a good night's sleep, and I needed to take care of that essential need for Cookie's people. But also, why was Cookie doing this? Yeah, we knew that things were crowded, but it's about the last thing I suggest is for people to rehome or relinquish some of their pets. They had too many of them here, but there are only a few cases where that's the only good solution. And I just didn't think this was one of them. And we did end up succeeding with this, but it was an uphill climb. Okay? So, but anyway, nobody was moving out. Everybody in the whole fourplex was staying. And so we were going to have to play the hand we were dealt. Nobody's living situation was expected to change anytime soon. So one of Mom's cats named Rex, he was the high status guy in the whole crowd. And he would come to the small enclosed front courtyard in front of Sarah's apartment and had beat up on Cookie multiple times. Okay? 1 week prior to our consultation, Rex had whomped on Cookie, causing a wound on the top of his head. And we see those kinds of wounds and abscesses on cats a lot around the head and the face because they're whacking each other with their claws and inflicting stab wounds that are deep and narrow at the surface and contaminated way into the deeper layers, and so that skin seals over quickly and it traps bacteria and it has no place to drain, and so the white blood cells and other inflammatory products die in their losing battle against all this bacteria, and you get a pocket of pus. And that can cause these cats to be toxic. In fact, back in the day, before there were antibiotics, I've been in practice a long time, but I don't go quite that far back, but there were cats that would die of fight wounds, of abscesses. We don't have that problem anymore, but these can become mighty sick cats, and so these kinds of fight wounds really need to be prevented. All right, so since that time, Cookie, if she goes to the door into the courtyard and sees Rex, she cries and howls with apparent words and comes back inside. And Rex, well, he bullies several other cats in the fourplex, and he's wounded a few of them. He's a tough guy. And, you know, he probably wouldn't be near this aggressive, even though he's the high-status, confident guy in the group, if he weren't crowded. Everybody's suffering because of this. So, now, inside the apartment, I asked Sarah, well, okay, what do you have for these cats to enjoy being cats, being in a quasi-natural environment when they're indoors? Well, they did have some climbing and perching areas, none of them particularly high. It's exceptionally difficult to find cat trees you can put against a window inside the house that go all the way to the ceiling, but higher is better. Well, they had a couple of these, and they had them against windows. So that was at least some usefulness to start with. But what they did not have was any places for their cats to hide out. And it's, you know, unfortunate that so few cat owners understand the importance of these cats getting that little isolation, that quiet time, that privacy so that they can get away from everybody, even if you're one person living in a good-sized house with just one cat. That cat needs to do the things that cats naturally do, like hide out in a snug little place. So they needed to do that, but I advised them on that a little bit later. Okay, so what they found was that because she didn't have any hiding places, they often found Cookie hiding out behind houseplants. You know, they already had 3 other cats in their home, but she was afraid to go outside. And something going on at night that caused her to keep waking up and pacing and crying. And not, you know, but during the daytime, she slept like a baby while her people were trying to go to work and do their jobs, right? So, if she was put outside at night, she would return after just 2 hours and yowl at the window. So if they put her out so they could get some sleep, a couple hours later, she was at the window crying and complaining, needing to come in. When they let her inside, she would pace and check the perimeter of the apartment, pacing and yowling. And then she'd finally go to bed. Wow. And during the daytime, if she wasn't asleep, she would follow Sarah around the apartment, which is something that overbonded dogs can do, but cats generally don't do that at all. So we had some problems here. So the question is this. If Cookie were your cat, this is a little multiple choice question for you. If she were your cat, what would you do? A, would you spray her with water until she was sopping wet, hoping that her behavior would improve? A lot of people do that. Okay? What they're doing is they're punishing the manifestation of the behavior disorder. And if you have a cat or a dog or a child or any other person or creature who is frightened and anxious, and you punish them at the time that is at its peak, do they get better? No, nobody benefits from having their fear and anxiety punished. So let's not do that. Let's figure out what the heck the problem is. B, choice B, yell feline obscenities at your kitty until she took responsibility for her mistakes. People do that. Doesn't make any sense. But you get frustrated in the moment, and I get it. Tony T, here, baby, do you want the biscuit? You can come back up on the table. He's on the floor. Would you feed the cat to shut it up? People do that all the time. And then what happens is that they become attention-seeking. Let me show you something I've been working on, Tony. Tony, sit. And if he starts to sink on his rear end, we go ahead and reinforce him because he's starting to get the idea. And that's called shaping. And ultimately, we require his rear end to get a little closer to the sitting position. Tony, sit. Ooh, did you notice his rear end sunk just a little bit further that time? I've been working on this, but where I've been doing it in the house is down in the utility room where I normally feed him, not up here in my office. And so he's in a different location. It's different. Tony, here, baby, sit. Oh, that was pretty good. Yeah, that was pretty good. All right. And I'll tell you what got me onto teaching him this little command. It isn't just to have a cat who follows commands, which is pretty good by itself, but there was a real reason. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So, multiple choice answer number D, would you make your cat an outdoor cat? Well, actually, the truth is that cats, to a large extent, are wild animals we keep as pets. I mean, they make great pets. Let's face it, they belong with us. They are domestic species, no question. Oh, you want more goodies. But they can do fine outside in most cases, but there are risks out there, so you better pick carefully where you allow a cat to be outside. Tony T, I want more biscuits, he says. Well, you're going to have to earn the next ones. E, would you report Rex to his juvenile probation officer? You would certainly feel like that, wouldn't you? Or F, none of the above. We'll get to the right answers here in a few minutes. So, Cookie was a miserable cat, no question about it. And so were her people, even more than Sarah and her partner were, more than the neighbor cats, even more than Rex. She desperately wanted a peaceful life, but she is overwhelmed with anxiety. She doesn't know what to do. She's completely confused. She feels trapped. She paces around the apartment. This is not a good situation. Danger lurks around every corner for Cookie. None of her unhealthy behavior is feline appropriate. Well, she is allowed outside, so if she's unhappy, why doesn't she just leave home and take up with another family? People sometimes wish their pets would do that. Sometimes they turn them loose hoping that that will happen, or take them to a shelter hoping that, well, because it's their person's fault, that somebody else would do a better job. That's completely missing the point. Because cats, they certainly are bonded to us, but in many cases they're actually more bonded to their territory than they are to their people. And so consequently, when they get pulled out of their home, they can get even more stressed. And we already saw that with Cookie when Sarah and her partner moved to the fourplex. That pulling her and the other cats out of their territory stressed them all. And the symptoms of that stress very often are anxiety related. And that certainly was the case with Cookie. So, she did have a grip on her sanity, however tenuous, until her people uprooted her and her colony. With so many other cats crowding her and competing for space, Cookie was unable to cope. Now, Rex wasn't any happier. Rather than beating the snot out of the other cats in his kingdom, he should be out hunting rodents for his survival. I mean, he's a cat, for crying out loud, right? But these natural feline food resources had been depleted in his environment. Well, number one, we've done a pretty good job in our society of getting rid of rodents, and there were so many other cats, there weren't any left anyway. So what was he supposed to do with his time? A natural predator, an obligate predator, a high status cat, he certainly should have been doing that. Well, Rex was sort of like Scar, Mufasa's maladjusted brother in the Lion King movie. Remember him? He thinks everybody else is just a hyena. He just wasn't doing his job. All right. So Sarah and her partner were stressed by all this dysfunction, and their patience was running thin. But they kept their cool, and they contacted my office rather than spraying their cats and relinquishing them or doing something worse. So I explained that Cookie was a very sweet kitty who was strongly bonded to her people and her home, and despite the squabbles with the other cats, well, she was bonded to most of them too. It was clear that Cookie's nighttime waking and yowling were indicators of significant anxiety, and following the move to the high-density fourplex cat high density, Cookie struggled with greater stress, largely from real and perceived threats, which is why she was pacing around the apartment every night. She was just checking to see where the next boogeyman was lurking. Not very much fun. So Cookie couldn't figure out how to solve her dilemma on her own. So she went outside, she returned, she got freaked out by Rex, she felt trapped inside the apartment, and at night she was conflicted. So she cried and yowled. Well, another significant component of Cookie's angst was her sense of being besieged by more than just the throng of other cats in the immediate area. There was more. The scent and the pheromones left on the door to her apartment by those neighbor cats were another constant source of dread for her. There are pheromones that are secreted by little glands between the foot pads of cats and dogs. And with cats in particular, in this high-stress situation, many of those little pheromones, they don't have a scent even to cats, but they convey a message, and that is fear, because there was way too much of that going on. Sometimes you feel like you walk into a room and the stress and tension, you could cut it with a knife. There are pheromones, and they're learning about that in people too. And so Rex's urine spraying resulted from his stress, and in turn caused more tension for Cookie and the other cats. So we needed to reduce the intensity of the stressors in Cookie's environment, and eliminating the owner of that cat urine on the front door would make an important difference. And so I instructed Sarah to use the enzymatic odor eliminator, anti-icky poo. Now, I don't have that with me right now. I have it downstairs. But anti-icky poo is one of a couple excellent, more than a couple really. There are some good enzymatic odor eliminators, but the best thing about anti-icky poo is that it not only has an enzyme that breaks down the organic components that are left behind in that are left behind when the water portion of urine evaporates, but it also has an active organism that eliminates even more of that organic material. Okay? So you got to get rid of every bit of it, and if you and I can't smell it, that doesn't mean much because, of course, cats have a sense of smell that may be more acute than dogs. It's about 1,000 times as acute as the human. So, got to get rid of that. Well, the well-being of all these cats improves if they have opportunities to escape, to hide, to climb, to perch, and engage in natural, primal feline behaviors when they're inside. Inside the house needs to be something that is a more secure, safe environment for everybody. So I turned Sarah and her roommate into my website, drjeffnicol.com, drjeffnicol.com. And if you go to the Behavior Help tab on the homepage and then click on Pet Behavior Topics, you will see, under cats, you'll see feline environmental enrichments. And there's a list of things that are all research-based. I just gathered it all in one place. And of course, the most important are floor-to-ceiling cat trees against windows in every room of the house, or wherever the cats go, and lots of hide boxes at various heights in different rooms, so that your cats always have a place to go hide out. Would you like to earn this, Tony T? Well, sit. There you go. Now, if his rear end's already on the table, that's okay. This is called capturing the behavior. Okay? So, the answers to the quiz Well, it was none of the above, was it? Okay, so here's Tony. By the way, let me show you some of the things that this little rascal does. This is just a little pad of Post-it notes, and we keep it in a cabinet. And he opens the cabinet door, and he chews on it. And he has chewed up boxes and all kinds of other paper, and it's the texture that he likes. Well, so what's wrong with that? If you leave out a box or a pad of paper for this cat to chew, that's a perfectly okay thing. Tony, sit. Whoops, there you go. If he just makes even a little motion in that direction, we're going to reinforce that, okay? But remember, we only give the command once because we want him paying attention. And let me explain why I decided that teaching Tony to sit was a good idea. Because our family brought out a behavior we didn't want completely inadvertently, by mistake. So Tony here, you know, he's a very personable cat. He snuggles up with us. He loves to be petted. And we feed him canned food on demand. Now, there isn't always somebody at home, although during the epidemic there pretty much is. And so we, look at him. Oh, he says, now I know where the treat bag is. Tony, come on, get over here, you little rascal. There you go. Tony, sit. Oh, that was pretty good. Did you see that? So instead, when he began to complain for food, we would say, well, he's hungry. So we would put some canned food in his bowl, and he would eat. And we gradually found that his meals were getting smaller, although he was still taking in a generous amount every day. It wasn't like he wasn't eating enough. He was just eating a growing number of meals of a decreasing amount of food each time. And so you would feed this little guy, and 10 minutes later he'd come and go, meow, 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 he wanted another meal. Well, it became clear that he was attention seeking. You think of that with dogs, but with cats? Oh yeah, with cats too. And it can be a problem with cats who are very personable, like Tony. Tony, here baby, do you see it? Tony, sit. Oh, perfect. That was pretty good, huh? So you can withhold food, and all he does is complain more. So what we do in cases like that is we put another element in this predictable series of events. You know, it starts with complaints, and then he gets fed. Complain, food, complain, food. So when he would complain, I would ignore him for a minute, and then I would take a little bit of this dry food, which he thinks is wonderful, because his main diet is canned, and I would go to his bowl, and I would require him to sit, and I would do it 3 times, and then put the canned food in his bowl. Well, I've been doing this for a couple of weeks, and again, he's better at this down by the food bowl. But what he's not doing now is coming and complaining so much, because I have thrown some other element in this series of events. So when I see him sitting and waiting, I don't respond immediately, but then I'll get up and go over, and I've got a couple of pieces of this dry food, and I make him sit for a few of them, and then I put his can in the bowl, and he eats. And now he's back to eating only a few meals a day, much more generous amounts. And this catches on to the point where he becomes a pest this way too. I'm going to teach him another command. He already knows how to come when called. Now he's learning to sit, and then we'll go with down. And we can teach cats to give me 5. You can teach cats a whole bunch of stuff. And so what he's going to learn is that he has to work to earn the food, just like a dog. Miss America, you do that, don't you? This dog has to sit before she eats, before she goes outside, before she gets a kiss and a hug. She looks for opportunities to earn what she wants. And there's not a reason in the world that these little creatures can't do that. Okay? So we gave all these instructions to Sarah and her significant other, and we scheduled a follow-up 1 month later. And things were better. They reported that Cookie was noticeably less anxious, and that she'd been going outside more and was yowling less at night. Well, that's a pretty big success. And she no longer when she came back inside, no longer checked the perimeter of the apartment, and she'd been gazing at the ceiling less. Yeah, that was something else that she was doing. These folks lived on the ground floor of this 2-story fourplex, and the folks above were Sarah's mom and brother, who had cats and 2 dogs. Well, she could hear that going on out there. It was driving her nuts. Okay, so she was doing much better. Sarah had installed a new cat tree, a nice tall one, that Cookie was already starting to use. And the odor eliminators, the anti-icky poo, they were using that on the door and around the outside of the apartment. And I can assure you that was making a difference. You reduce that scent and those pheromones from Rex and the other cats, And Cookie and everybody was starting to feel a little bit less overwhelmed. Okay? So, I also told Sarah, look, if your mom would confine Rex to the inside of the apartment, things would get a lot better. Mom was not interested. Had to play the hand we're dealt. Mom just wasn't this, oh, Tony T, you little rascal. He's, here, Tony, here, baby. Look. I'm going to give my treat back to Carolyn because Tony's going to pester me relentlessly. Whoops. Let me get my, there we go. Thank you. Okay. So, Rex was hanging out on the balcony from the upstairs apartment and staring down at poor Cookie. And so what the owners decided on their own was they had a back door too. So instead of, by habit, letting Cookie go outside through the front door where old Rex was in the habit of waiting and ambushing her, they were letting her out the back door. And Rex just didn't use that side of the apartment building. So it worked out okay. You just got to, kind of manipulate the situation and do what works. So Cookie, she was vocalizing significantly less, and when she did, it often took the form of a chirr or a meow rather than a yowl. And the cat vocalizations have been figured out and broken down into what they actually mean. And chirrs and meows are often caregiving and social communications rather than a yowl, which is more an indicator of stress and distress. So purely by that, we knew that we were moving in the right direction. Now, there was another reason, by the way, that Cookie improved, and that was this was a severe problem, and it was affecting this cat's well-being in a very big way, not to mention her people. And they were on the verge of relinquishing that cat when they came in. Frankly, they were getting desperate. And so, in severe cases, we do whatever it takes. And so I prescribed anti-anxiety medication for Cookie, and these are safe. We understand how they work. Possible side effects, but we don't stick with anything that gives us side effects. We make changes. But as in most cases, Cookie didn't have any problems at all. She felt better, and the medication helped without any problems with appetite or lethargy. She just felt better. And so we bring everything together we can, integrate all the elements that we can to improve the situation, and Cookie did better. So finally, Sarah and her significant other, a couple years later, because I follow these cases, they were able to afford to get their own house, and they moved out of that high cat density situation, and Cookie hasn't stopped smiling since. And so we were able to successfully taper off her anti-anxiety medication. Worked out okay. But one of the other things that comes to my mind is that many pets don't have enough of the fundamental behaviors that are necessary for their species. And they live sort of a barren existence. Their people don't mean that to be the case. But cats are supposed to be hunters. They're supposed to spend most of their time in the wild trying to catch rodents. They are successful about 1 attempt out of 15, believe it or not. So if they're going to survive, they've got to be successful and they have to work at it. Well, our pet cats, they eat out of a bowl. So what are they supposed to do, right? Well, if they're not highly stressed, they can get into other trouble because they don't have opportunities to do what they're genetically programmed behaviorally to be doing. These things are hardwired into their brains, and we don't give them these opportunities. So even if Cookie were not stressed by Rex and all these other cats, she still would have thought, what the heck am I supposed to do with my time? And she could get into trouble. And that's why giving cats like food toys, for example, and I know I show this one often because it's so easy to use, but there are lots of food toys for cats. This one is actually meant for dogs. It's called a twist and treat. And you can put dry food in the halves of this. I like to put canned cat food in these and then screw it back together. And initially you can leave it pretty far gapped apart. And you've got canned food in it. And then freeze it overnight in a Ziploc. The next day take it out of the bag and you leave it for the cat. And you don't give that cat anything in his bowl. So he has to work at this funky shaped thing and manipulate it and try to figure out how to stretch it apart and extract the little bits of cat food popsicle and stay occupied working for his food and getting good and tired, which you're supposed to do. Okay? So yes, an idle mind is the devil's workshop, isn't it? And you can give them enrichments. Floor-to-ceiling cat trees against a window with a suction cup mounted bird feeder or bird house on the outside. You can give them hide boxes because they need to do that. You can make them work for their food. They don't have to go outside to have pretty close to a natural feline life. And then when they're with us, they can be relaxed, nice pets. Okay? So take the time to build a foundation of choice and freedom for your cats and dogs, opportunities to be who they need to be. And make sure that you don't just foist your own needs on your pets, because like people, they can get obstinate. They can resist change if we're only trying to get our needs met. It's never too late in a relationship to build trust, to teach our pets that they can rely on us for safety. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to post them on my Facebook page. And you're also welcome to go to my website, drjeffnickel.com. And if you want to, you can go to the bottom of the homepage and subscribe. Just put your email address in, costs nothing. And every Tuesday morning, you'll get my weekly blog, which is actually my newspaper column from the Albuquerque Journal from the preceding week. And you'll get the Facebook Live, so you don't necessarily have to tune in. You can watch it the next week. It comes automatically in your email box. And when you do subscribe, I'll send you also at no charge, as a gift, my at-home pet first aid and CPR guide. Those are worthwhile, just in case something goes sideways. You want to be ready, okay? You can save your own pet's life. So thank you for being part of this and sharing a little time with me. I do these because I see as my work to bring out the best in pets and their people. That's right, my little sweet. And so thank you for being here. I hope to see you next Thursday evening, 6 o'clock Mountain Time. We'll do this again. And please be safe and wear your mask, and we'll get through this thing together. And look, I have a question. There it is. Isabella. Well, thank you, and thank you for being there. I love it when you come. Isabella doesn't even live in the United States, and she shows up anyway. And we appreciate that very much. So everybody have a great weekend, and enjoy your pets. And remember, only if they catch fire.